pop the stream over.
Do you want us to mute when the stream's on? Or?
You're welcome to sit and ask questions and stuff like that. That is more than fine. That's what this channel is for. Uh, and believe we're live as well, and that goes to everybody in chat as well. If you would like to sit in the JV2A Discord in the comms array channel, then we can rattle off questions back and forth and try and solve some more oddities that if you've run into warpgate. Oh, the delay. Yeah, that might be. If you're in the comms array, you might want to mute the stream. I'm not going to have any sound effects or anything playing on the stream. I thought about that. Okay, so yeah, let's dive into it. So the purpose of this little stream is just to give an intro and a little bit of background on how I approach Warpgate and how I build for Warpgate. I'm sure if you've taken a look at the README or any of the examples that myself or many other people are starting to put together, really great work. The first thing you'll notice is that it probably looks a bit a bit wild, a bit complex, and then you say, okay, well, let me go look at the README, and you get this, and you say, okay, you know what? Let me just let me just back up a little bit. Um, Totally a reasonable a reasonable reaction, but I want to try and chip away at that initial learning hump because that is I believe if you can get over that initial hump and you can make just a couple warpgate scripts that do even just very basic things, it will start making a lot more sense. The way that the module itself has been put together is incredibly modular, meaning I have options that you could use or not use. I have lots of optional arguments that you can take advantage of or not. So it is designed to be flexible and designed to help you do what you want to do. Now, I only get left speaker. Oh, that is odd. Okay. If I switch to this, so I've switched my microphone input. Uh, I wonder if this is coming out both channels now. Okay, okay, cool. Yeah, a little bit odd with my virtual cables. Thanks for the heads up. Um, cool. So if anybody in the chat is a little bit unfamiliar with what Warpgate is, Warpgate in its most basic form is just a wrapper around the Foundry API. It's designed to wrap up a bunch of operations that I ended up doing very often and wanted to make small tweaks with. Things like spawning actors, um, just placing an actor on the field, things like spiritual weapon and flaming sphere. That's where this all started. So I ended up with these huge complex macros that did its job, but every time I wanted to move on to the next thing, I'd have to completely deconstruct it and reconstruct it, and it just ended up being a pain. And then 0.8 came around and everything hit the floor. So I basically deleted all those macros, never to come back to them again, because I'm going to make something that I can maintain that all of these scripts can sit on top of. So that's let's see. Yeah, that's enough about the intro of Warpgate, because it doesn't really start making sense until you can see what it can do. So let me minimize this. And I just put together just a random scene here, and we're probably not going to use the actors too terribly much, but I want to just start with something incredibly basic. The main purpose of Warpgate is, its main initial creation was to help spawn and scale tokens. And so it is very easy to do that. The command is just warpgate.spawn with a given actor name that exists in your world. And I'm going to break this down a little bit more. So it's just warpgate.spawn, and we spawn a bandit. And you can see that as that now a little template-looking thing has been attached to my mouse cursor, and I can position it wherever I would like, click, and boom, we have a bandit. That is the basic operation of it. The cool part is players can execute this as well. and they can actually summon actors that they do not have ownership of, which makes it really, really great for things like it's like conjure woodland beings, I think, where you're going to conjure something, but what it ends up being is kind of random or up to the DM's decision. So instead of having to assign every single woodland beast to the player so they can control them, you can just spawn a bunch of them and you have innate control over them. So I'm going to be working from the GM side, but everything I am doing with warpgate, apart from modifying unowned tokens, can be done on the player side. So getting back to this initial command, warpgate.spawn, I want to kind of show you how to use the readme. Close down my other Foundry instance. How to use the readme. Sorry, I'm getting a couple pings left and right. Yeah. So what we want to start at is the table of content. So on the GitHub/triad region/warpgate is the readme, and I've put a lot of effort into making this as clear as possible, not necessarily concise. I'm a rather verbose person, if you haven't noticed already. But let's take a look at the category of spawning commands, and I hope this is coming through on the stream. Let me just make sure it is. I hope this is coming through on the stream. So we're going to take a look at the spawn command. Everything is preceded by warpgate here, so I'm not going to repeat that every time in the readme. And looking at and reading the signature can help a lot. So I'm going to take a minute and kind of deconstruct how I write these signatures, because I'm a little bit new to JavaScript as well, and I think my conventions aren't necessarily the same conventions that JavaScript programmers use. But what the signature of spawn is saying is it's saying this is async warpgate.spawn with several parameters. Async means that you can await this command, is that something is going to go off and do a thing, and you can have your code wait until it's done. Coming back to the script I just wrote, let's take advantage of that. Simple JavaScript command of await, and that says, hey, you're going to hand me back a promise, and I'm going to wait until that promise is resolved. And a promise is just a structure in JavaScript saying, hey, I promise to finish this at some point in the future. I'll get to it. The caller can wait for it. So async, a lot of the warpgate commands are async because we're dealing with the Foundry database. And any Foundry database operation, creating embedded objects, modifying objects, moving things around, is a database operation. So we're going to slap that right in front of warpgate.spawn. The first parameter is actor name, and this is literally just the name of the actor as it appears in the sidebar. It can be anyone that exists, but it does have to exist in the world. I can't read it out of a compendium asterisk maybe yet. Look at that in the future. For now, it has to be in the world. That's pretty self-explanatory. Updates, callbacks, and options. This is where the flexibility of warpgate comes in. But notice that the way I've written this, for instance, updates equal an empty object, which means as we've done here in our macro, I'm not providing it a parameter. So it is going to use a default empty object parameter, which effectively means I'm not going to update anything. I'm not going to send it any callbacks. I'm not providing any options to modify how it behaves. And we get a spawn of a bandit, all as well. Want to introduce, for this stream, I'm going to try and keep it relatively low level, and I'm effectively going to leave the whole callback system out, because that's a rather advanced topic, and what you can do with it gets really, really weird really quick. So I'm going to leave that to the side and focus on updates and a few of the options. And the first option that I want to show would be a relatively common one called the duplicates option. Let me show down here. Further down in the README, under the options object, it says it's optional, which is correct. You can hand it Oh, my formatting's off. All of these should be one level more indented. The controlling actor, this is more of a placeholder, but it can be used with other modules. It just says, hey, this summon, this spawn was spawned by this actor. So if you wanted to start strictly associating summons with tokens on the board and modify controlled summons, Gamerflix, this will be, hopefully this will be recorded as a VOD for Twitch, and hoping that'll live on in perpetuity. I have a few VODs saved off. They don't seem to have gone anywhere, so I'm going to hope that that's why I'm streaming on Twitch, is to hopefully keep a VOD. I will start recording just in case. So, back to the building of this script. One bandit's not that interesting, particularly like even against level 1 characters. A one bandit is not really a challenge. So I don't want to spawn just one bandit. I want to spawn 4 bandits. That seems like a more reasonable option. And so I could loop this for const iter n equals 0. Iter is less than 5, etc., etc. And I could wrap this in a loop, and it will play very nicely because we're waiting. But that's manual, and warpgate is not about manual. Warpgate is about shortcuts. Warpgate wants you to tell it what to do. Just give it the data, and it will do the rest. So let's play with this duplicates option. Again, I'm missing a formatting, but duplicates, if it's greater than oh, sorry. Can't even spell it. Every time I look at this readme, I find errors in it. Surprise. But the duplicates option takes a number, and it will spawn multiple tokens from a single placement. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to spawn 4 bandits. Now, you'll notice something that I'm sure a couple people have been tripped up by regarding optional arguments. The fourth the 1, 2, 3, yeah, the 4th argument is options, which is what I'm providing here in this place. But because it falls on the end of the function, and there are other optional arguments that precede it, namely updates and callbacks, I need to actually give that a value. Maybe a naive thought is, oh, they have default values, so I can just say bandit and duplicates 4 and it's all good. Well, what will immediately happen is that JavaScript will interpret this duplicates object as an update object, and it's just not going to do anything. It won't error out, but it won't do anything. So that's one of the big things that you'll notice. If you start filling in the options objects, which are common across many of the warpgate functions, you do need to take care to fill in the default values for the parameters that precede it. Then we simply execute, and nothing looks different. We're going to place 1 bandit, but then 4 will spawn around it. And this the spawning algorithm will consider other tokens and walls, so it will try and avoid placing like split across walls. It'll try and keep everything on the same side of a wall, to the best of its ability, and it will avoid tokens. If everything fails, it will start placing tokens right on that initial point that you chose. Lost my train of thought. And just by the way, this little bit of algorithm was provided very kindly by the Ripper 93. He handed this to me, and it worked great after a little bit of back and forth to get it to fit my use case, and it's been extremely handy. But it may not always be the case that you want to spread them across. So if we look closer at the options, the other options we can send, collision. It's a Boolean that controls whether the placement of a token collides with any other token or wall and finds a nearby unobstructed point. You can turn this off, and you can say, for whatever reason, what I'm doing here, I need the duplicates to be slapped all on top of each other. This is a pile of gems that you will grab and delete, and you need more of them for whatever reason. So we simply add that option to our options argument, And then when we place bandits, yeah, there's indeed 4 of them stacked on top of each other. So that's kind of the basic overview of spawn, just getting something on the board. A little bit of style note that I found was really helpful is because warpgate is so modular and broken apart and meant to be used like Legos, I find it a lot easier for my small brain to understand and to keep track of, to create these objects ahead of time, to say, hey, these are my options, and just defining an object ahead of time. So I can see, hey, when I'm using options, and we pass it in just like any other argument, here's where I have it defined, and boom. Here's where I have it defined. These are my options: duplicates for, collision false. I'm going to flip this back to true, which is the default, but it doesn't matter. And I also end up doing this for the updates. Now, I think the updates object is probably the one that you're going to be interacting with the most when it comes to warpgate.spawn, because that was the initial function of it. Yeah, you're absolutely welcome, Snoopy. I hope this helps. I like talking about this stuff. It makes me happy. I'm glad it's helpful. And yes, Flo, I am using the Monaco editor module because it looks a little bit more like Visual Studio, which makes me comfortable as a old C++ programmer. Previously a C++ programmer. I'm not that old yet. Getting there. So let's dive into the options, the updates object. And when I'm putting together these warpgate scripts, I say, hey, I know I need to update something. Let me just throw down an updates object. And so I'll put that here, updates. Okay, cool. And fill that in the appropriate place. And then I can forget about it. I can go and start looking up data for my own little thing, and there's my updates object. But this updates object is detailed here. The second parameter, updates to the spawned actor. See update shorthand. So this I know is going to confuse people. It was difficult to write in any coherent way. But the update object is effectively saying, these are all of the changes I want to make to the thing that I just spawned. The thing that I just spawned includes the token, the actor, any items on the actor, any active effects on the actor, basically any other embedded document on the actor itself. For this discussion, I'm using the D&D 5e system just because I'm very familiar with its data structures and don't have to fumble too much on stream. But I'm still going to show you how to derive it. So we just want to say, hey, these bandits, we don't want to call them bandits. We want to call them highwaymen. So I want to, and this is how you break it down. You say, I want to modify the token's name. Okay, so update shorthand takes token, actor, and embedded. Excellent. So let's create a token object within the updates object. If I can use correct syntax, that would be great. Let's create a token object inside the updates object. And now is where we start digging around in the data structure a little bit. This one is relatively simple. All Foundry entities have a name field. That's part of the basic Foundry data structure. And the name field is what controls this, bandit or paladin or acolyte or what have you. So I just want to change that. And all you have to do here is provide a bog standard Foundry update object. And when I say a bog standard Foundry update object, they're called documents. Sorry, I'm going to keep calling them entities, objects. Yes, they're all documents. When I say bog standard update object, I mean literally one that you could send with token.document.update. And hopefully we've seen or at least interacted with this type of update. And that's all warpgate is doing. It's just wrapping that token update. So we're just going to call it highwayman, collision true, and let's run it again. Zoom out. Let's give us a little bit of room. Make this a little bit smaller, easier to see. There we go. And let's execute this. Again, when we place it, boom, highwayman. So now they're all called highwaymen. Excellent, cool. Customizing. You can do that. You can modify any other property of the token. You can modify its size, its opacity, its linked actor status, the actor that it corresponds to. You can really, you can change any part of it. So let's quickly touch the actor as well. So the next thing you'll probably end up doing is saying, okay, the bandits are cool, but they're not the threat that I needed. I needed a little bit more. This is no longer a bandit. This is a highwayman. They're a professional. So let's see what we can do about that. A professional would probably have a little bit more dex and probably a little bit more wisdom to choose the right targets to hijack. Let's go ahead and modify this. I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm not 100% sure what the data path is for this. So let's go exploring together. And so I'm just going to bring up everybody's favorite DevTools console. And I'm going to have one of these highwaymen selected. And we're just going to dig through its actor data a little bit. So right off the bat, underscore token is a helper in the console that Foundry provides that represents your last selected actor. Notably, that is different from the token variable that you will often use inside of macros. Token inside of macro is your currently selected object, your currently selected token on the canvas. Underscore token is your last selected one, which is often the one you have selected, but not always. So don't ever use underscore token in your macros. You will just confuse yourself and cause trouble. Really, you don't want to use anything that starts with an underscore if you can help it. What I like to say is you can use a function or a variable with an underscore in front of it if you can defend in court your use of it. If you have a good reason to do it, go for it. If you don't have a good reason to do it, you probably need to find something else. Anyway, back to it. Token.actor will give us the actor object, and I know that I immediately want to dig into the data. So the data object inside of a document contains the core Foundry data that it needs, plus any system-specific data. The core Foundry data are things like flags, effects, image, permissions, items as well. I might be a little bit wrong with these embedded effects, so ignore that for now. But we can see actor has a name of bandit. Oh, these are highwaymen now. We need to update that. Actor name is highwayman. Cool. But we also want to up its dex. Dexterity is a system-specific object, a system-specific concept. So I'm going to dig into its data one more time. I know that data.data confuses everybody when you first get into it, but just generally think of the first data is core Foundry and the second data is system specific. That's not true 100% of the time, but it's a good starting point. So let's dig into the data. We have abilities, that's what I want. My dex, that's what I want. And my, where's value? Value, that's what I want. So I want to change this value to 14. Now you can copy the property path, which is very helpful, abilities.dex.value. Cool. And we are actually inside of data, so we'll add that later. But right-clicking on any field and clicking copy property path will copy the path all the way up to where you started. So if I was instead to do, this is a handy trick I end up using a lot of times, particularly for updates, because we always sit inside the first data when we update. So I like to start at data and then dig down to where I want it. Abilities, dex, value. Cool. Let's copy that property path and come back over here. And you can use the dot notation inside these objects, just like any other Foundry update. And we're going to change this value to 14. We're also going to up its wisdom. We're also going to up its wisdom to 14 as well. Cool. So now this looks like a highwayman. It looks like a little bit stronger guy. We're going to execute this. We're going to toss him here. You see it avoided the walls. Yeah, I placed it directly on a wall and it said, I don't do that. I'm going to go to the nearest one I can find, which is pretty cool. But now we have a highwayman, and lo and behold, its dexterity is 14, its wisdom is 14, compared to our old highwayman, which was actually just a bandit in disguise, 12 dex, 10 wisdom. Awesome. Token and actor updates are like any other update you do in Foundry. The update shorthand comes in with these embedded objects. So embedded documents. Embedded documents are effectively documents that are owned by another document. They live inside that document. They're embedded within that document. One of the most common embedded documents you will interact with actors are items. Probably the second most common might be active effects, but items are the big thing. So let's focus on that. What does this highwayman have? This highwayman has a scimitar. And this scimitar does 1d6 plus mod. Yeah, that's pretty lame. What if this was a what if this instead was a cutlass that did 1d8? You know, we could create a highwayman with that item on there, or we could create it ourselves. So the highwayman can keep its scimitar for now. That's totally fine. But I want to add something that I call a cutlass. And let's see. How do we want to approach this? So we're going to use a scimitar as the base because we're just changing the scimitar. Actually, renaming it might be a little bit weird, but let's just start with the scimitar. So I'm going to be updating an embedded item. So I start with, as our update shorthand indicates, the next field is embedded, and the embedded name is the next field. So capital I item, and we're going to modify the scimitar. So you just type in the name scimitar, and then we decide what it's going to be named after. I have a feeling I'm about to run into a bug as soon as I do this. Now that I think about it, I have a distinct feeling this will not hold, and I need to log that and fix it. But I would like to change the name to Cutlass. And we also want to up its damage. So this gets a little bit tricky, mainly because it's an embedded document of another actor. So as usual, we go back to our console. And I still have a token selected. Yep, I still have my highwayman selected here. And let's dig into its items a little bit. So token.actor.items is its map of items, and just about every embedded collection, every collection that I'm aware of, has a get name. If it has a name property, it has a get name. So I want to get the scimitar, and I want to see what's inside of it. Specifically, I want to see what's inside of its data, because that's what we're updating. So let's go ahead and jump down into the data. Okay, we have item data. What we're looking for is, we know we want to change the damage formula to 1d8 plus mod. So naively we say, okay, that has to be a system specific variable, so let's dig into the data, the second data. And we look down, its ability, dex, armor, attack bonus. Okay, damage. That looks important. So we open up damage and say, oh god, there's parts inside of it. What? Then we open up that, we see something that looks familiar. Okay, this makes a little bit of sense. It is 1d6 plus mod of a slashing type. And we're going to use that information and close down some of these windows. Going to copy this property path as I did before. And we're going to say, okay, I closed it without saving. So let's do that again real quick. Embedded item scimitar name is cutlass. So now our next one is data.damage.parts. As we copied straight out of the console, easy peasy. Now we have to take a little bit of care. The value of parts is an array. And this array has two entries in it, the damage role and the damage type. Because it is an array, warpgate treats that as a final value. It's not going to try and diff arrays because that could get extremely weird extremely quick. So an array is effectively an atomic unit as far as warpgate is concerned. So we have to update the entire thing. Easily enough, 1d8 plus at mod, and just for giggles, we're going to make this bludgeoning. Why not? And so now we have our scimitar update. This should work just fine. It should spawn 4 duplicates. I'm starting to run out of room a little bit. Let's see what happens. No errors. I always like to see that. Open up its features. Oh, hey, look at that. Past Badger actually did do it right. So we've renamed the scimitar to what if the path could be damage parts.0. You know what? We'll actually, let's give that a shot, Wasp. Right after I finish this. Yeah, let's give that a shot. So now we have a cutlass that deals 1B. Cool. 1B, huh? That was completely unexpected. So now we say, what did I do wrong here? Damage.parts. Oh, it's a double array. So it's an array of an array, if I remember correctly. Because yes, there can be multiple damage formulas. Okay? This is a common thing that happens all the time. Run it, say, that's not right. Execute macro again. Highwayman. We have a cutlass whose damage is 1d8 plus at mod of a bludgeoning type. Cool. We're back in business. That's one. That'll get you. So what I missed here in this parts definition, not looking at the values, I'm going to get this real big so we can all see it. Parts is an array containing an array size 2 is how you read this. I just focused on array 2 and forgot the fact that it was inside of an array. So we are actually opening up an array here. Parts.0, which is what yeah, as Wasp corrects himself, parts.0.0 might refer to this that first damage 1d6 plus mod. Let's go ahead and try that. I haven't actually tried that. We're going to see what happens. So Wasp says, hey, let's try using an array addressing data path. This isn't my forte, but it should be something like this. Array 0 at array 0. And we should, if this is palatable to Foundry, we should just be able to say this. The 0th index of the 0th index is just 1d8 plus mod. We are going to learn together. Okay. Yep. Whether this is an error with warpgate handling that, which it actually at least one part of it is, because I do expand these objects into their full representation. So that's a good thought, Wasp. I'm going to keep that in mind because that would certainly help addressing these inner arrays, which can otherwise get a little bit cumbersome, as you've seen. Like we've had to, I can't go back that far. Okay, 1d8 plus mod, restore what we had. Bludgeoning. Double array. Okay. So that's kind of that's a general overview of how to go about spawning these things, how to kind of dig down into the data that you want to find, where it's generally hidden. There's all the errors for trying to do that. Let's clear that out. Your game system, if it's not, I mean, your game system will define its own data. It'll have its own nuances, like the double array for the damage parts may not exist. Um, yeah, can't handle array indexes. That's my expectation to Flow. I haven't seen indication of array indices like that, but it might be interesting if I could integrate that into warpgate as a wrapper step. Let's keep that in mind. So, moving on a little bit, we've spawned something. It's pretty cool, but now we want to look into the second system of warpgate. How am I doing on time? 3:45. Okay, this might be an hour and a half at minimum as I try and get through the various pieces. So the next major component of warpgate, let me scroll back up to the top, is the mutation system. And again, warpgate is just wrapping operations that you could do yourself with just the core API. None of this is unique to warpgate. Simply the approach you take is a little bit easier, in my opinion. So let's take a look at this signature. So we're gonna keep building on this and see if we can just make a really wild creature spawn out of this. So it is an async function, which means I probably need to await it. Warpgate.mutate, and it wants a token doc. So I look at here, I look at the first entry and it says token document. The token document to update does not accept a token placeable. Okay, so the difference between a document and a placeable is basically a placeable is the thing you click on the canvas, and the document is the data behind it. So I click on this highwayman. This is a token placeable. To get the document, it is simply token.document. Easy peasy. But what we're going to do here is we're actually going to spawn a group of highwaymen, and then we're going to make one of those highwaymen to be the leader, the captain. So we're going to modify this after the fact. How are we going to modify it after the fact? We quickly hop back to the spawn command, and we wonder what its return value is. An array of IDs of all created tokens. Okay, cool. So I can store that. Just created IDs equals await.warpgate.spawn. So now created IDs is an array containing token IDs. And one of these guys, we'll call it the first one created. It doesn't really matter. Const captain ID is going to be the created IDs, the first entry in the created IDs. And like any sane programming language, JavaScript is 0 indexed. If you interact with any other language that starts with 1, you know that a scientist wrote it, and you should really just back away slowly. Created IDs is 0. Created ID 0. We now have the captain ID, and it's as easy as const captain doc equals canvas dot tokens dot get captain ID dot document. So I'm looking up the token by ID, which I've gotten from warpgate. Cool. So now I can just fill in 3DS, yeah, 3DS Max, Lua, yeah, exactly. Exactly. It really throws me for a loop every single time. Captain doc. So we want to do something with the captain. We want to, let's pretend that this particular highway patrol or highwayman group has a captain that is the captain only because they have recently injected some ridiculous magical potion akin to a steroid that just makes them big and bulky and really a brute of a person, and so they're obviously the leader. Okay, no arguments there. So let's try and represent that a little bit. Big and brr is a larger token size, and probably has a few more hit points, and probably has I don't know, a slam attack instead of just a cutlass, and that will do 2d6, 2d8 damage or so. We want to start constructing this. So, as usual, I stop what I'm writing here, and I create I'm just going to call it M updates for mutation updates because I've already declared a constant up here and I want to keep that. So I'm just going to separate it with a little leader. And we want the token to be named captain. We want the actor to be named captain. And we want, in addition to the actor's name being changed, we also want to modify its HP. So we quickly dig into the actor data again. I'm going to go a little bit quicker because we've seen this a couple times. Data.attributes.hp. Okay, perfect. That's what I want because I want to modify two things at once. I want to modify the HP document, the HP entry, data.attributes.hp, and I want to update this so that value is 30. It has 30 hit points, and its max is also 30. Let's see, is my indentation right? Always something to watch out for. Okay, that looks right. Ugly for some reason. Anyway, HP is 30. I'm not going to update the weapon attack because we have it is the exact same operation here, the exact same thing. And I'll leave that as an exercise to the reader. But we want to make this the captain, and we want to make him a little bit bigger. And this is why I leave these object definitions outside of the function itself, so I can easily see it, go back to it, modify it. We want its width. I believe it's its width because I always mess this up. Width and W. W is the pixel size and width is the square size. So I want to say width of 2, height of 2. Good to go. That looks good. And so now we go back and we reference our mutate. We say, okay, we got the token doc, and now we've crafted our updates. It's the exact same functionality. M updates. We aren't going to deal with callbacks right now. I'm just going to leave that alone. I want to provide some options. So what happens is, turns out this is a very temporary effect. This alchemical steroid infused with magic is a very temporary effect. And it's going to wear off at some point. Fortunately for our players, it's going to wear off mid-battle, which everybody will take a sigh of relief. Don't forget to save. Saved. So we want it to wear off mid-battle. And if more things were to stack on top of us, we want to make sure that we are able to revert this alchemical steroid. This magical steroid. That's what I meant. It's magical steroid. So I'm going to look and see what our options have. And options, comparison keys, I'm probably going to leave to the side for now. Name. And name and permanent are two useful things. So permanent, the default being false, basically tells warpgate, this is a change that is just going to stick forever. No need to track it. Just update it as you would normally. And this is the exact same thing you would do with an actor.update using the core Foundry API. Yeah, every minute it saves the macro. So we're going to leave. We don't want this to be permanent, but we want to give it a name. So for reasons that I'm going to show you in just a second. We want to give it a name, and as we do, M options, I'm just going to break it out. Const M options. You can tell I'm not only verbose in my rambling, but verbose in my coding as well. We want to name this magical steroid. And we're going to put that in. Okay. Let's get rid of some of these guys. Let's save it so I don't break anything. And let's see. So now what should happen, like already we have quite a beefy script, really. We've done a lot with very little effort. So let's spawn our group of 4 and let's see if we get a captain. And we did. Now, my placement's a little bit weird because I mutated after all of them were placed. So that's something that you can go in, you can adjust, you can change, you can space them out. You can have 2 different spawn commands, one that spawns the captain and then immediately following the rest. That's fine. But we do have a mutated captain. So now we have a captain who's 2x2. It has the highwayman stats, but it also has more hit points. And yeah, that was what we're looking for. So why use this system? Because during this battle, that magical steroid is going to wear off. Now, some of this could be done with active effects, like you're boosting your hit. Actually, no, you never. Let me just stop. Never ever touch HP or temporary HP with active effects in at least the 5e system. Don't do it. You're going to cause yourself some wild looping effects. So really, warpgate is the more correct way to do this. We've modified his HP. But now we want to look at the header, because this is where some really handy tools for warpgate get placed. This dismiss button gets placed there on any tokens actor that you have ownership of that was spawned by warpgate. That was a mouthful, but basically, if you spawned it with warpgate, you will have a dismiss button up on top, and that dismiss button does exactly what it says on the tin. It allows you to delete that token. It's not very interesting as a GM because you can do that all the time, but it's incredibly helpful as a player because you can not only summon your flaming sphere, but you can also dismiss it when it's done, and you don't have to bother the GM while they have 15 other things that they're trying to keep track of. But other is this revert. So if we just click revert, oh, okay. So we saw our hit points revert, we saw our name revert, and our size. So now he's just a normal highwayman again. So why did we even name it? What was the point of that? The point of that was if you hold shift and click on revert, this is hidden, but it is documented in the revert function. Let me just double check. Mutation commands revert. This function is exactly what this button calls, like verbatim. Yeah, note, shift clicking on the revert header button will present a dialog from which specific mutations can be reverted. Shift click, select mutation to revert, magical steroid. So if I was to then click that, boom, reverted. That's, I mean, we could just click it instead. But what's going to happen is inevitably we're going to do something else. We're going to do something else. We're going to increase its. He takes another steroid because he's just. I mean, that's what this guy does. He just takes steroids to run the crew. Actor is. And I'm just going to embed this straight in here. I know I'm kind of breaking my own advice, but I just want to show this really quickly. Dex, we're going to bump him all the way up to 20. Bump him all the way up to 20, and we're not going to send in the options again. We're going to name this potion of, what is the word? Alacrity? Like dexterous movement? We're going to call this potion of alacrity. Sorry, steroid of alacrity. Okay, good to go. Delete these, and let's try again. All right, so we got the captain. Let's open him up. We've got our 20 decks. Perfect. So now we have an actual use for this. Potion of Swole. So when I shift-click revert, now we have 2 options, and that's where this really comes into play, is I can revert either one of these. So say, for instance, the magical steroid runs out before the steroid of alacrity does. We just revert the magical steroid. So we are now just a normal highwayman with 11 hit points and still our 20 decks. Because when we look back on the mutation stack, our steroid of alacrity is still there. A rather recent major addition is this idea of a named mutation that you can selectively revert. And there's some complicated logic behind it, particularly if mutations if multiple mutations affect the same data field, like if you both affect HP, there's a logical progression, but it probably will be a little bit odd. And in short, basically, I slap down one mutation that is like HP plus 10. So now I have 20 and 20 hit points. And then I stack another mutation that says, hey, change the HP to 30. If I was to then go in and say, this first mutation and everything that was connected to it, I want you to revert. So anything unique to that, say we touch the dexterity or we created an item in addition to changing the HP, those other changes would be reverted. It'll come back, nothing ever happened. But because a mutation higher on the stack has modified our field, we are simply going to walk up and say, hey, top mutation, when you revert, I need you to revert all the way back down to where I was going to go. You keep your value, and when you revert, go down to 10. So start at 10, we apply our first mutation to 20, we apply our second mutation to 30. We rip out and revert the first mutation. We still have 30 hit points. When we revert the second mutation we added, it now will drop back down to 10, the original actor. Point being, if you revert all of your mutations in any order you want, you will get back to your original token, your original actor. And that was the design goal for that, is that you won't ever lose your original actor based on how you revert these things. Okay. So that is, we have now made a group of highwaymen with a roided out captain. Excellent. They have unique attacks. They can do, we can modify anything we want from there. I've kind of already talked about that. So another common thing, and actually I think I want to leave that to the end just because it's a little bit more involved, but a very common thing, I think that Varix, forgive me if I'm pronouncing your screen name wrong, but Varix with his automated spell effects, he, for like things like Moonbeam and spells that effectively give you a new action to use, he's been doing this a lot. Advanced spell effects, thank you. Automated animation, advanced spell effects. Anyway, where's I going with that? Yeah, so sometimes you are basically given a new action that you can use. For Flaming Sphere, you can use your bonus action to move the sphere around and do things. Attack with it. What we can do there, and what Varix has done a lot, is to create an item macro that when you cast the spell, it casts like normal with item.roll, and then it does a warpgate.mutate and adds a new, it's probably a spell. I think it's probably an at-will spell that's usually added that is configured however you need. If it needs to do damage, something like Dragon's Breath, where you actually get a brand new attack action where you breathe out a cone of fire, you would effectively, let's just cover it very shortly. How I would go about that is to create a standalone item that looks exactly how you want. You put all the properties in, the descriptions, all of that, good to go. Then you inspect that data in the console. I did end up doing a lot of TAing as FlowRad. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thank you very much. That's very kind. So you would create it entirely in the sidebar, and then you would dig into its data in the console using game.items.getName and just look at the data that it contains. A lot of that data is just going to be stock default values, but you can look in there and you could copy out that entire data structure. You could export that item, copy out everything inside of data, and slap that inside of your item mutate. And you're good to go. You can also get a little bit more custom about it, like you know that you're touching the description, the name, the type. Every created item has to have a type. And so, pro tip, if warpgate ever yells at you and says that you did not provide a type for item creation, or the created document is missing field type, it is because you thought you were trying to update an item. But if warpgate does not find the item name that you are changing, it's going to assume that you're trying to create a new item. Whether I need to get more specific about that in the future we'll see. But that's a pro tip. If you ever get an error concerning type, it's because warpgate thought you were trying to create an item rather than update an item. Anyway, you would take all of that data out of your flame sphere movement item, slap it in here very much like we did here. Instead of just name and data.damage.parts, it would be a whole item definition. Big, huge thing, or small, depending on how you call it. And that would work the exact same. So whenever you lose concentration on that spell or dismiss that spell, you can dismiss your actor yourself, and then you can shift click your revert button and revert your flaming sphere. And so that would remove the item that you added, that at-will helper, or we were talking about Dragon's Breath. It would remove your Dragon's Breath ability, which is really handy. It's all put together. You click it once, you're good to go, and then you can just revert back to where you were. Side note, on my Ko-fi page, KOFI at Triad Region, there is a post called Experimental Warpgate Plugin, where I take this concept one step further, and I use Warpgate's event system, which we can talk about in, I guess, a future episode. We use Warpgate's event system to actually monitor for concentration drops, and the module will basically throw out a notification saying, "Hey, this actor lost concentration." Any client that wants to monitor that, likely the client that executed the concentration to begin with, will get a notification, and it will run whatever code was set in the watch or trigger for that event. I do a little bit more explanation, a little bit more demo, and you can see the code on my Ko-fi. It was a really cool little thing, and that showed what Warpgate is kind of capable of. It has nothing to do with token creation or spawning things. You can actually monitor events and send out signals and respond to them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The last thing I really want to cover, now that we've kind of talked about the mutations, talked about how to go about them, how to dig into the data, particularly the items, because that is the hardest to access data, is the items. Those are the kind of two creation functions, mutation and spawn. There's a third system, actually, there's 4 systems in total. Yeah, and the third system is Crosshairs. This came about completely unexpectedly, and I'm sure most people here have played 5e, or at least touched it enough to know that, like, when you use an ability that has a template, such as Fireball, you click the spell and a circle template gets stuck onto your cursor, and you can place it, and boom, a measured template appears, and it kind of indicates where that fireball is going to hit. That is a really handy placement. That is a really handy thing to be able to do, to be able to show something visually on the canvas and then have the user click on something and do something based on that location. So that's where the crosshairs came into play. Just for now, I'm going to create a new macro. I'm running low on water. Excuse me. So, crosshairs. Let's pop back to my README. This is something that comes in it's very useful. Even if you don't use the rest of warpgate spawning and mutation functionality, it can be useful as just a very easy way to get a user to click somewhere and then do something with it. So, Crosshairs commands, show. This is the one that we care about. Async, okay, let's start there. Await, warpgate.show, sorry, warpgate.crosshairs.show, which is stated here, good. And we see that, oh, both options are actually, both arguments are optional. Cool. Let's just see what happens when I say await warpgate crosshairs show. And I make it a script macro and run it. And so there we go. We have a little targeting thing attached to our cursor that is snapping to various grid points. Why are the callbacks an object instead of an array, by the way? Because it is intended to provide a single callback function that you execute. Inside of that function, you can do whatever the hell you want, but you're basically handing me a function to execute at a given time. I really didn't want to emulate like the hook system. I wanted to be a little bit more lockstep. Give me a function, I will execute it. I hope that answers your question. Just kind of it's a design decision that made my life easier. So we can show a cursor, great, but what's the point? Why do we care? We care because of the return value. Return value object contains all the fields as measured template data with the following changes: width and canceled, and a third one I have not updated with radius. So width, this is the final size of the template's diameter in grid squares. What do you mean the final size? What that implies you can, exactly, that implies that you can change the size of the crosshairs. By default, the size is locked. And so we're going to reference our crosshairs config. It's a bunch of options because it just keeps growing. It's easy to add these things in, but it's a lot. One of the more recent ones I've added is lock size. It defaults to true, but if you set this to false, using just an options, just the config object, the first option, everything's the same, but if I hold shift and scroll, I can change the size of the displayed crosshairs. This is useful for a number of things. It could be useful to, for example, say you have an ability in a system that, like Open Legend. Basically, if you're trying to do an AoE, any attack can be an AoE. You just get stacking penalties for every additional square you affect. So you could kind of model this with crosshairs. You say, okay, I want to actually zoom. I want to make this a 2x2 square that I hit. And so you can shift and you can increase the size of it. And you say, okay, that's the size I want to hit. I want to hit these 3 bandits because I don't quite get this 4th one. Cool. Nothing pops out, nothing happens, but let's take a look at our result. Let's see what the return value is. And let's just log it. And honestly, I do this as the start of most of my crosshairs operations. I just want to make sure that the data that comes out is, the units I'm expecting, the range of numbers I'm expecting, just sanity checking. Execute macro, let's make it a little bit bigger, and boom. Okay, so hopefully we got some stuff in the log when we did. So let's see what we got. Angle, so there's a lot of just default measure template stuff, and a lot of that doesn't matter because yes, it's always going to be 360 because you can't rotate it. It wasn't canceled, that's good. The direction doesn't matter because it's a circle. Distance, however, distance says this was a 15 feet distance. Let's see. So this is radius. See, this is how I double check it every single time. Distance 5. So that is actually in grid units radius. So this is a 5 distance measure template. This would be a 10 distance. I probably need to clarify that in the README just so I don't have to go through that again. Oh, your cam is in the way. Could you clear? Oh, sure, yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go through that again. This guy over here. Actually, I'm just going to turn off the. I need a little bit more space. I'll be right back. Just turn that off for now. Let's try it again. So we're going to execute the macro, and we're going to stick it right in the center of a square and see what the distance says. 2.5. Okay, the radius is 2.5 feet because in this particular scene, I have our grid scale as a distance of 5 units. Cool, that's helpful. Size of 1. This is saying your the size of your final circle of your crosshairs is 1, is a normal medium token. If we were to increase it a little bit, then we have a size of 2. That is just a height and width of 2. So you can also, like if you have a monster that you spawn and you can arbitrarily change its size, there you go. You can use this size readback to do your own spawning. The texture is null. The width is 2. We've talked about that. It's 2 squares wide, size 2. They're duplicate information, and then the X and Y. So now we know exactly where we clicked. We know how big it was. We have the radius in pixels. So the radius was 70 pixels, which should be right if our grid is 70. Yes, it extended exactly 1 square to the right. Cool. And that's about it. So we can use that, and the biggest thing that comes out really, and a lot of times you'll see this kind of expression, X, Y, radius, and size. This is a really handy bit of JavaScript syntactical sugar, and if I'm not mistaken, it's called object destructuring, not deconstructing, destructuring. And it's saying, hey, the object that you return, I really am only interested in variables X, Y, radius, and size. So now I can refer to, like I can log out X directly. Boop, I click. Console is not a function because I actually need to tell it to log. Click, and 2205. That's our X coordinate. Great, good to go. So that's a utility that you can use for many applications, particularly coupled with the last little helper I want to talk about before I show you just something really cool with Crosshairs, is the very new function called Crosshairs collect. Where is it? Crosshairs config collect. So notably, this is not an async function. It's just it's a serial function. You execute, you get the result back, all is well. And what collect does is it returns the desired type of placeables whose center point is within the crosshairs radius, or another user-defined filter function if provided. What this effectively allows us to do is say, going to just grab this as a result, because while you can definitely feed in, I think the only, requires, the first parameter requires at least X, Y, radius, and scene. So you can provide those from any other function API call. You can use collect without ever using crosshairs, no big deal. But we have a crosshair, so let's go ahead and use it. We're just going to log this out and say console log, and I'll turn my camera back on after this. Console log warpgate dot crosshairs dot collect, and we say crosshairs data, which is our result, types, and we're not going to do a filter. So the types I care about is I want to collect tokens, and the type is a specific embedded document type. We talked about embedded documents at the beginning of the stream. They are simply documents owned by another entity, another document. Hi again. And so I want to collect token, not tokens, not token with a lowercase t, but the embedded name token. And I just want to log that out to see what happens. And I realize that my face is a little bit in the way, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. There we go. we can actually see it. Cool. So now I'm going to collect tokens whose center point is within our radius. Execute macro. This tiny one's not going to do it. So what if I increase it a little bit? There. That, if I'm seeing this correctly, should probably collect these 3 highwaymen, but not its captain. And the result we get is an object keyed by the embedded types. So the embedded type of token gives us, yay, 3 token documents in response. These are the 3 highwaymen. Let me prove that to you with actor name. Where are you? There. Highwaymen. Make it a little bit bigger so you can see. Boom. So we collected these 3 highwaymen using collect. The exact extents of this I haven't quite toyed a lot with, but I have made things like when you are placing a crosshair, when you're moving a crosshairs around, it will actually live update with the number of contained tokens. So you can actually run this collection method inside of one of the callbacks executed by show. Advanced topic, just to tease you a little bit for the next one. You can do some wild things live during crosshairs. The optional filter, which is the 3rd argument, simply allows you to define your own method of collection. So understandably, collecting the center point of a token really only works well if they're a 1-by-1 token. You know, when we do this and we are collecting these 3 bandits, should the captain be included with that? Some people would say yes, some systems would say no. I don't know, it depends. Any, all, contained, who knows? So that is what this 3rd option is for. Contained filter. And so contained filter here is the expected signature. So if you simply create a function that returns a Boolean, takes a placeable, which is a token, for example, or a tile, or a note, or ambient light, anything that's placed on the map, and you're given crosshairs data, which contains the fields that we just talked about, you tell me if it's contained. Yes or no. Do whatever you need, you tell me. And then that will be used to collect everything, and we move on. A very easy way also, when you're usually just collecting tokens, you can then immediately index the return value of token to boom, to just get the array directly back rather than a keyed object. I end up doing this a lot. It looks kind of weird, but I want to extract token out of it. That's how we're going to go. You could include multiple things. You could collect tokens, tiles, and sounds and do work with, is this sound contained on top of this tile, but not touching this actor? I don't know what for exactly. It sounds like a puzzle to me. No, like literally a puzzle you would play in a game. So that's what I want to cover with collect. And I'm going to kind of close out the stream. Well, before I close out the stream, I'll definitely give some time for just open-ended questions. But the last thing I want to do is just kind of show you how flexible the crosshairs can be. Because if nothing else, a module could use the crosshairs just for its own purposes. So I've kind of prepared this ahead of time. And what we are seeing here, let me just make it a little bit easier to read. Texture, lock size, draw icon. So we've seen some of these before. Not all of them, but some of them. Lock size. We haven't seen texture. Draw icon and draw outline are false. So I think just from this, you can tell what's about to happen. I'm about to spawn a crosshairs using one of the very lovely free JB2A animations called Fire Ring. I'm going to allow you to change the size, and I'm not going to draw the icon or the outline of crosshairs. So if you recall just a second ago, when we were placing these crosshairs, I'll do it again here because it's using the same class. When we place these crosshairs, we have an icon and I can't really zoom in at the moment, the icon of something, it's arbitrary, and a circle border. Well, we can turn those off, that's fine. And when we do that, we can make something really cool. That basically turns the crosshairs. It's actually interesting that it's not playing. I think that maybe that's my fault. I don't know. Yes, it's your free module. Thank you, Ben and Jules, for your free module. That is, I'm not a visual arts person. Making fancy animations is something that I'm glad the community has taken and used warpgate to make beautiful summoning animations. That's really never going to be me. I think I've made one animation for an ability that wasn't used in my game. So, you know how it goes. Crosshairs.show. Let's try this again. This might, I don't know whether it should be animating or not. That could be my bad. I'm not sure. But anyway, we have effectively created a fire ring acting as our template border. I think that's pretty cool. Like, you could replace, if you want to style your own crosshairs for your module, you can give me textures. And just really quickly before I kind of close out my rambling about it, texture will basically, it will do maths and it will center your texture on your crosshairs. Because I'm sure if you've ever tried to naively attach a texture to a circle template, you get like 4 bits of your texture kind of wrapped around the center point. And that's because of how UVs and textures work and how you address negative values and things like that. As usual with warpgate, I'm going to handle that nonsense for you. So when you give me a texture, I'm actually going to show you what the original one looks like. Modules, JB2A, library, I think it was generic and fire. Yeah. Circle red, something like this. So it should be animating. It did at one point. I'll have to look into that. We'll call it a bug. But you see how this is square. Like, this is, its top is up in the left, and this is not intended for a circle template because there's nothing over here in the negative UV. So it would wrap over, and I'm getting into texture rendering. It doesn't matter. Anyway, most textures you want to apply to a circle won't work. I handle that for you. I make sure that it gets scaled according to the size of the crosshairs and it gets centered. So it's trying to make it as easy as possible. If for whatever reason you don't want me to do that, your texture is exactly how you want it to appear for a circle, then just tell me, hey, just this texture can be tiled. It doesn't matter the scale, the offset, this texture can be tiled. Don't do anything to it, which is an option. I think that is going to, that hit the majority of topics that I wanted to talk about. Just how to dig around, what you can do with it. Crosshairs config is huge and rich. You can do a lot of wild things with it. But there are some helper functions that are also really great. I'll leave this as an exercise to the user. Wait is just a built-in wait function, which I use constantly. I think everybody kind of does, particularly if you're, I know sequencer kind of includes its own wait function, but sometimes you just have to time animations. It sucks, but sometimes you just got to do it. You got to wait for a second and a half for the animation to get to exactly this point, and then I do something. Dismiss is just the dismiss function, but button dialog and dialog. I see people tripping over dialogues constantly and like making things way harder on themselves and just, or giving up because the dialogue in Foundry admittedly is a bit opaque at first. And always, yeah, I'm gonna say always, it's a bit opaque. So I've created these helpers with a button dialog simply presents a button, a row of buttons or a column of buttons that return a value that you dictate. This is really helpful for like the Tasha summons, where you like summon aberration, where you can choose one of 3 actors to spawn, and so that is a perfect use of a button dialog. You have, you know, the aberrant spirit. This aberrant spirit is like a slot and a something else, a star spawn. You just click on that button. I know Silicon Saint has done did a lot of initial work, making really cool summoning and scaling options for the Tasha stuff. And that's pretty much exactly what they did. They sometimes used it horizontal, sometimes vertical. You can also add icons to it. It's just data that I'm going to render. The dialog helper is it pairs well with the button dialog, but they have non-overlapping functionalities. Button dialog is just that, buttons. That's all you get. That's all you can do. But you can define the value of that button being pressed. You get a certain value back. Dialog allows much more complicated forms. It's still going to be stacked on top of each other. That's just how it is for sanity. But you can put things like headers, little bits of information. You can have text inputs. Password just came along because it's free. You can have radios so that you could select one of 4 colors, and you can use a radio group to say you can only pick one of them. So you can't have a blue-green flaming sphere. You can have a blue or a green flaming sphere. Checkbox is exactly that, numbers and select. These are things that we've all seen in Foundry and things that a lot of us have actually coded up in a dialogue just painstakingly. I'm here to make this a little bit easier. It takes a little bit to figure out like what kind of array you want to send, what data you get back, but I've done as much as I can to try and enumerate what you send it and what you get back as a return value. I think I'm going to stop there. That's an hour and a half. That's not bad, actually. Half an hour per warpgate functionality is not that bad. So I'm going to stop rambling, and I hope you enjoyed this. And are there any questions or use cases or something that I just jumped over that you'd like a little bit more information about? Take a second. Feel free to jump into the comms channel of the JB2A Discord if you want to just ask by voice. The text is fine. Since FlowRad has already kind of mentioned callbacks, I'll just point you towards that as maybe some advanced reading material for the next one of these talks that I do. Mutation callback functions, spawn callback functions, and Crosshairs callback functions. I hope they're detailed well enough to use for sure.
Hey, Badger. This is
Hi.
Jules, GV2A. Hey, this has been absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm not great at, well, you may know, I'm not great at JavaScript, and just to see you code into a macro has been
I'm glad.
really, really helpful. Yeah.
I'm glad, and I do want to emphasize it. If you look at the warpgate README, it looks like it's a mile long. I mean, it's because it is. It's a mile long, but you don't ever have to deal with more than one thing at a time. I'm modifying this bandit's item. That's the only thing I need to think about. And if I only hand that to Warpgate, that's the only thing it's going to do. Yeah, so I'm glad you saw how I developed this, how I made some mistakes, and kind of used the console to dig out the commands that I want. And even just that little example, if we look back at it, I mean, that's a macro. Like that's a thing that does something. And
Yeah, it's
we
amazing.
were just putting it together. Like there's just line by line by line, and everything works. Yeah, fun.
I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one who's going to rewatch the video and and try exactly what you did and just to
Good.
get a little
Yeah.
bit of exercise. It's great.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad this is helpful. I had fun doing it as well. And I kind of said this on the hammering it out stream, if you saw that or not. But
Yeah.
one thing that Warpgate it, warpgate is a bit of an enigma even to myself. I've built these tools that are flexible, don't break, and follow the Foundry um, ethos, the patterns that Foundry uses. So warpgate is, it can do. I don't know exactly what its limits are. Like what can you apply it to? It can be a concentration monitor. I never expected that to happen. You can put together these pieces of warpgate to make something that I never expected. I made a token following module, Squadron, based on
Mhm.
warpgate.
Yep.
Oh,
Well, that's really cool. Well, actually, you're talking about concentration. I don't know how easy it would be to give a demonstration of how that could work. Like, do you
uh,
need item macro, or do you need to
let
like
me. I don't have it. I don't have it pulled in.
okay, maybe that's something for another episode or something.
But I can certainly point to it. Here we go. I can certainly point to it. Experimental workgate plugin. Uh, yeah, let's just show what happens. So I'm casting dancing lights, and through some fancy math magic, I click once and create all four. And now I'm concentrating. Concentration is there. When I remove concentration, all of the lights disappear. And
See, and that's all done via warpgate.
it's a two-part thing. So one I implemented as a world script. This is the monitor. So this would be effectively the module. The module would be watching for concentration, and it's not even that long. It's like the core logic is just this. It's just saying, hey, whenever an active effect changes, fire off this, fire off an event called add conk or delete conk. And then any client in that, so basically in the auto dismissing dancing lights via item macro, this is the item macro used to spawn those dancing lights. And we can see it, it does some things, it does some math, some offsets, and it does some spawning with some callbacks. That's cool. But this very last line is all that it takes. It says, whenever this actor loses concentration, dismiss all of the IDs we created from this scene. And it says warpgate.autoconc, which is just the namespace I gave it, dismiss on loss. And it's like the actor, the IDs I want to dismiss, and the scene I'm going to dismiss it from. And then it's out of your hands. You casted it, and you told warpgate to do this when this particular concentration drops. And it just does it.
Excellent.
Yeah, please poke at this little warpgate plugin. I'm going to eventually turn it into a more full-featured module. Warpgate in general for more 5e specific things. So I could I could give some templates for scaling, for common scalings and things like that. So you don't have to derive it every time or look at my wiki. Just some helpers for 5e, since that's what I'm very familiar with. Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's just
I hope
great.
that answered your
I'm
question.
trying to think of questions, but I'm like,
It's a
there's
lot.
so much to take in. Yeah, yeah, it
It's a
is a
lot.
lot. Right.
um, yeah. So we could let's see. Do I see any? Yeah. I think Chad is probably just about as stunned as you are. You are, Jules. I think that will probably close us out. Small self promotion. I'm currently an unemployed developer, and every little bit helps. If you like what I do, feel free to donate what you can if you can. Um, I do this because I like it, and basically, the longer I don't have a job or can afford not to have a job, the more I can do this kind of stuff. So it's kind of a good and bad situation, but yeah, that's all. I'll try and get some more posting up here, some more ramblings. I have possibly a new project coming up that'll be pretty major that I might be able to drop some hints about later on. But yeah, I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to me ramble. Uh, Hopefully, we learned a thing or two. Once we, digest it, watch the watch the VOD for a couple of the pieces that interest us, feel free to ping me in the Foundry Mothership as Honey Badger. I'm one of the moderators there, or in the League Discord or the JB2A Discord under the same screen name. I'm always happy to see new uses of warpgate or old uses of warpgate. I just like seeing it out in the wild doing things. It makes me happy. I think as any developer would say about anything they're working on, right, Jules?
Yep, that's right.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. We're going to close this out. And yeah, Rogue Entity, this should be up on a VOD. I hope. I'm going to make sure it sticks around. And I guess we could probably do another one of these Badger Talks in the future. So keep an eye out. I'll announce it in the JB2A server because they have been kind enough to kind of give me a home. Yeah, so that'll do it. Badger out. Thank you all so much for coming by.